Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 19 of the Unchained Vodcast. We are now several episodes into season 2. It is, of course, great to be here as usual. We have with us Brand and Kriss. Hello, guys.
Hello,
Hey.
hello.
Today, we're going to talk about something a little bit controversial. Honestly, this is a topic
Just
that
a
we
little
have
bit.
avoided.
Slightly. Just,
I won't say this. We've avoided this exact topic for like a year.
we've avoided it.
But
We've avoided
it.
it.
We've really avoided talking about Crowfall, period, for like
Yeah.
a year because we just didn't want to get into it, and we really didn't want to like annoy a ton of people or really upset a bunch of people. But we finally just kind of decided, or I kind of did, that we needed to talk about Crowfall, namely what I wanted to look at, because lots of other sites have compared Crowfall, and that's what's really kind of got this going, because other people have compared them. Other people have also occasionally asked the question, is Crowfall copying mechanics and systems and things from Camelot Unchained?
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa, maybe. It could be.
Yeah.
It is only fair, I think, to start off by pointing out that both games are ultimately very different in some very significant ways.
Yes.
Crowfall has temporary game servers. They don't have like the perma worlds. Crowfall has more of an action-based combat system than Camelot Unchained does, where it has a little bit more of the traditional MMO systems rather than the action combat. And Crowfall, while it has housing and buildings and keeps and stuff, it uses like pre-designed assets instead of the free-form building of Cube. So there are some very stark differences. The two games in ultimate form really couldn't be that much different, I think. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about are individual game mechanics and systems that have been adapted over. And in order to start that, what I would like to start off is by asking you, and of course, chat as always, or I should say, as a Camelot Unchained backer, when Crowfall was first announced, what was your impression? What were your thoughts about Crowfall, its mechanics, and so on?
Honestly, it pisses off a lot of the community that are Crowfall backers. But to me, the first thought was, it looks like a MOBA.
That's
It
what
really-
I heard a lot.
To me, it looks like a MOBA.
I've seen Crowfall supporters even say that some of the mechanics play like MOBAs. So
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my initial skepticism, but I think there was a theme pull towards Camelot Unchained that made me just like, when I heard or saw things about Crowfall, I was like, not really following that. I like the medieval thing. I like the Camelot setting versus the almost, to me anyway, randomness of Crowfall. Stylistically, it has its own thing, but there's nothing for me to really connect to.
And I looked into it a bit when it was first announced, and when they said they were getting some inspiration from Game of Thrones. I still don't see where. I've looked. I still don't see what's in that game that takes inspiration of Game of Thrones.
I did originally, that did kind of appeal to me. Asipita said it looks like WoW, which I can agree. There are some similarities.
It
in the
looks
art
very
style.
cartoonish.
It's kind of cartoonish in that regard. Not the exact same art style, but it's kind of got the more cartoony art style to it. Oldevic didn't like the temporary nature of the game, which is kind of where I come from. When I first saw it and saw the announcement for it, I was actually kind of excited for it. I was into Camelot Unchained, but I wasn't like super into Camelot Unchained to the point where I wouldn't consider it at all. But well, I shouldn't say wasn't, but I was like, I might play Crowfall a little bit, on the side or something, especially because they've got centaurs, and I've always wanted to play a centaur or like a naga or something in a game, and I've never been able to. But the temporary servers and stuff kind of struck me, especially as like an RPer, and I didn't feel like the community was going to have any kind of real RP presence to it, and both of those kind of pushed me away from it. Honestly, the similarity in the mechanics, even though I did read into it a little bit initially, the similarity in some of the mechanics didn't strike me initially until people started putting the two games side by side and going, we're going to compare these. And there's several websites that have done comparisons. Crowfall to Camelot Unchained. How are they similar? How are they different? And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But it wasn't until people started doing that. And I feel like there's been a kind of an undercurrent of some people asking the question we're asking today about copying. That hasn't been too prominent. And I kind of want to just push it out there and go, no, we're going to look at this. We're going to look it in the face, and we're going to come out the other side, and we're going to decide something, and maybe we convince people, maybe we don't, but who knows. Let's see what else chat is saying. Of course, Chaos would rather follow Pantheon.
Yeah.
Pantheon does look pretty interesting. If I wasn't following Camelot Unchained, I might be more interested in that.
Yeah, as a former EQ player, it appeals to me a lot. But one of the things that made me think MOBA, and one of the things that really for me is a pretty big no, and why I will probably not play Crowfall, is the locked race class thing, where it's archetypes and you are locked. Depending on the class you choose, you're locked with the race, or vice versa. It's really not something that appeals to me.
And it's kind of a weird thing, too, because it seems to me like that comes more from Asian MMOs, usually, where you get race and class locked. I mean, sometimes in Western MMOs, too, but it seems to be
very
more
rare
often in those. And so that was kind of an odd thing that should just pop out.
I find that race, in general, is more of a customization option for character customization. And the articles, at least I've read about it, have talked about how there's supposed to be a lot of that for Crowfall, and yet that's something to me that's extremely important for customization, and it's missing that. So
yeah, that was another thing that kind of pushed me away. But I don't want to get too much into why we're not following Crowfall.
Of course.
I just wanted people's initial thoughts on it. It doesn't seem like anyone really said their initial thought was copying. So. You know, though most of us don't seem like we were following it that much either. Now, what I would like to start by doing, well, we've already started, but what I would like to continue doing, and I have a bunch of notes here because I did an unbelievable amount of research for this
I believe
podcast.
Totally believe it.
So a little bit of this, I am going to be reading from my notes a little bit because, as I said, I'm not a super active follower of Crowfall. I don't have all this stuff memorized. But the first thing I want to do next, or the next thing I want to do, is read off the similarities between Camelot Unchained and Crowfall when it comes to game mechanics. As Sakrix just said, it's all been done before, and we're gonna entertain that question. We're gonna look at that. So, looking at the similarities between the two games, they're both massive PvP games. First, obvious, blatant similarity, both massive scale PvP games. In both of them, you can claim territory and build keeps on those. The keep building systems are different, but you can build keeps on some of your territories. They both feature building destruction. They both have player-driven economies. Both of them use caravans to transport materials. Now, I will point out, I do not know how that works in Crowfall. I don't know if it's the same at all. I just know that I have read that they have a system of caravan-type things that ferry materials. It may be between their server worlds or something. That whole thing is really confusing to me.
We should probably point out we don't even know how that works in Camelot Unchained, really.
Yeah.
Well, no,
True.
We do know that in theory there's going to be routes and you can attack them. I don't know if these are attackable. I don't know if they're PvP oriented at all, or if it's just that, well, in order to carry materials back from one realm to the next, you have a caravan, and I don't know. I just know that they have some sort of supply caravan type concept in the game.
If I read correctly, because from what I've read, you cannot take people's houses and castles and keeps, because they're in a different realm. So you can build there. These ones are private, a bit like the dimensions in Rift, apparently, where it's your own housing area, and then you have buildings that you build to gather resources within the PvP server, within the PvP realms, that those can be destroyed, but your actual castle and house are in a non-destructible area where only you can access, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Now, Sacrix is saying that Crowfall's PvP is not massive scale. Their website says it's large scale PvP, but what is large?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To finish off my list here, because we're going to go down into each one of these really.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
just to survey the list. Crowfall does not have a crafter class. However, in their materials, it states that if you want to be a prominent crafter in a campaign, you're going to have to really focus that as like a main activity. So you don't have a class for it, but that's like your main thing you're doing. Both of them have equipment decay until your equipment breaks so that it can be replaced by crafter items. They do not have auction houses. Crowfall has points of interest, which seem more varied than the places of power in Camelot Unchained, but they sound like they serve a similar purpose, PvP-wise. And it sounds like some of the points of interest are similar to places of power. Now, it should be noted, that's something, most games have objectives, so I'm not going to say they're copying, the idea of objectives. Just saying, it's a similarity.
Yeah.
Souls can be infused into gear in
Did read
Crowfall
that.
and in Camelot Unchained. Crowfall also has NPCs that can help with crafting in their concepts.
Like shopkeeper NPCs.
And shopkeeper NPCs.
Yeah.
They both have a focus on physics, which I thought was interesting,
Yeah.
because a lot of MMOs kind of skip over physics, or they don't include it really as a very heavy element at all. Both of these games are really pushing that in part of their advertisements, their messaging, saying we've got physics, and we're, there's player collision,
Yeah.
there are siege, and buildings and debris will fall on you and crush you and kill you.
And apparently projectiles also are physical objects in Crowfall also, because they say you could hit somebody else than your target if somebody passes in the path of your object. It doesn't seem like they have the reactions between objects, between projectiles that CU has, which is probably not in their realms of possibility with the engine they have anyway.
Yeah. I said player collision. Both
Yep.
games have day-night cycles. They have annual seasons. And both of them have kind of emphasized more limited crowd control, stuns, things of that nature, which is definitely not common in across games. Some games certainly have more limited CC, but so to get to my next question, now that we've looked, those are all the things I could possibly find, all the mechanics that are similar or the same across both games. Maybe not same in implementation, but same concept.
Sure.
So Camelot Unchained was founded in 2013. That's when the Kickstarter went up. That's when we publicly knew about Camelot Unchained. Crowfall's Kickstarter came up and was announced in 2015.
Sometime later.
2 years later.
Yeah.
Now, I have seen people on Reddit tell me that Crowfall was started in 2013, and then they did the Kickstarter later. I have not been able to find a source for that. I tried. I have not been able to find an actual source of it, but I will say on their Kickstarter, they did have videos with in-game assets that showed people running around fighting and stuff. So obviously they had done some work prior to that.
It is not uncommon, especially for Kickstarter, to have started something to show for your Kickstarter. So yeah, very possible.
Yeah. Now, as Sacrix said earlier, nothing is original. Everything's been done before. So the first question I think we need to entertain is it, can all of these things really just be explained by saying that they're both PvP MMOs? And
yes
so
and no.
Most of them.
Yeah. Yes.
No.
Yes and no.
I'm going to say mostly no, and the reason for it is because there have been so many theme park MMOs over the last
Yes.
decade that when you try to break from that, there's really only one direction to go, which is the opposite direction. So when you start making a game to break that mold, the new games start to tend to follow a certain trend as well.
Yeah. But at the same time, there are things in there that, for me, I don't know who came up with the ID first, but they look very similar. The first one, I looked at Crowfall kinda in order of you creating your character, and the first thing I see in the character creation in Crowfall is what they call the advantages and disadvantages. That sounds a lot like the Banes and Boons, and that's not something that is very common.
It's not. It's not super common. Oldovic said yes. I'm assuming in reply to this, explaining that a lot of these things are adapted from other games. To add some info, Camelot Unchained takes major inspiration from Dark Age of Camelot and many older MMOs. Both the developers of these two games are from the older MMO genre, really. Crowfall, while they don't really, I don't think they really put it on their website, most people I think would say that it's inspired by Shadowbane and Star Wars Galaxies. And they do kind of mention Star Wars Galaxies a fair bit for their crafting and everything. Dark Age of Camelot had player housing, item decay, and encumbrance, which both of these games have. Shadowbane had boons. They didn't call them boons, but they did have character boons, character advantages. I don't think they had the disadvantages, but they had like character advantages you could pick. Territory keeps with building and destruction. So really, to me, looking at that, in some of these systems, it sounds like both games copied or were inspired by both Shadowbane and Dark Age of Camelot.
No, absolutely. You take... There are some new things to at least Camelot Unchained that are, again, inspired. It's not the full copy-paste implementation, but it definitely starts from something that they've seen before, especially with Mark Jacobs being, a designer of other games. He knows what worked for him back then. He's going to use the same things to try to make this work for him now.
Yeah, let's see. Oldovic, Banes and Boons comes from the advantages and disadvantages of old school RPGs, which is another fair point. Camelot Unchained even mentions that as the source of inspiration, or CSE mentions that as the source of inspiration for Camelot Unchained, just taking it from pen and paper.
But when I say it's not common, it's not common in MMOs.
No,
you see it everywhere.
It's actually pretty rare in MMOs, but you see it in a lot of things. Yeah, in a lot of games.
Pen and paper games. It's existed in other other genres.
It's not an original ID. Yes.
No, there's no original ideas. Ashia Domain. I butchered that, but okay. Said these are all generic concepts, and I will say most of the ones I just mentioned are definitely pretty generic concepts that exist in some ways, like item decay. Most MMOs have that. Now, do they have it where the item completely breaks? No, that is different, but most of them have some kind of item decay in some form. Let's see. Oldovic asked if you'll be able to nerf your character in Crowfall and character generation like you can in CU. I don't know, honestly.
From what I've read, not as much.
It doesn't sound like
it, no. Probably not as much.
The advantages and disadvantages are more geared towards specializing your archetype rather than being able to gimp it like you could in CU if you fuck up your choices.
All of the examples I've seen have just mentioned stat disadvantages, like lower intelligence or lower strength, whatever, rather than the numerous different type of environmental changes you can hinder yourself with in Camelot Unchained.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do, and I have a feeling we're going to need chat's help with this.
Probably.
What I want to do is I want to look at these systems that are similar in both games. And for many of them, I know other games that used these same systems, and so I'm just going to mention them, that they came from these other games. There are a couple where I don't know, or I only know maybe one game that has that same system. So let's go down the list. Player Collision, Warhammer, and Age of Conan both, I believe, had, if I recall correctly, had Player Collision. So it's not a completely new concept. Not tons of games have it, but it's not brand new. It's nothing super innovative. In fact, many people get completely turned off by Player Collision because they've had bad
why they stopped
experiences
doing
in those
that.
games.
Yeah.
Because you can get, it's simple as that. It's because you can get griefed so easily with that.
Yeah. And,
Not to mention, it's a system that is universal to the entire game, not just the PvP element.
Yes.
But if you're in a city, say, you might get stuck in between a wall. You don't want to be there.
Yeah. And for PvP games, it's usually really bad for the performance.
Yeah.
Claiming territory, building keeps, outside of normal just control point maps. Age of Conan, EVE Online, Shadowbane all had it. So again, nothing super new there. Building destruction, Shadowbane had it. I don't know in what form Shadowbane had it, but for most older MMOs, that's kind of a hard thing to do. The computer technology was not as advanced, so I don't know any other games outside of Shadowbane any other MMOs, I should say, any other MMO RPGs outside of Shadowbane that had building destruction.
And outside of that, building destruction was mostly scripted if it was like an RPG game, so you
Definitely
really didn't interact with it. Yeah.
And so I'm looking at the chat. Do y'all know any MMOs outside of Shadowbane that had any kind of building destruction like that? Dayak had building destruction.
Well, it was not building destruction. It was just siege keeps. So it was very scripted also. Just like in ESO, you can destroy a wall, but it's a very specific area that is scripted to have that.
Yeah. Preset animations, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Oh, Shadowbane. I've actually already mentioned that, but
there you go.
Let's see. Crafting class focus. EVE Online. Sort of Star Wars Galaxies, but I count it because Crowfall also only sort of has a crafting class focus. It doesn't really have a crafting class.
Star Wars Galaxy Star Wars Galaxy, you could be just a crafter.
And Ultima
you could
Online.
be just an entertainer.
I don't know if it was a focus, but all of that possibility was definitely there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Souls being like enchanted into weapons. I'm opening this because honestly, I don't know of any other games that have that.
Oblivion, Marwin,
MMOs.
MMOs.
Any other MMOs that allow you to imbue souls into weapons? Now,
did ESO do that?
It's a little bit different.
Sorry?
Camelot Unchained, you defeat your enemies and you can loot their souls or something and imbue them into weapons.
Yeah.
In Crowfall, you just find these thralls in the world or something, and then you use them to make weapons. So it is a little different.
They are more like to me it's more like a PvE reward.
Yeah, it's more
for
like
stats.
it's
it's skill boost basically. So
But-
it's not these souls. It's just a skill boost.
Yeah, but the concept, I mean, they're basically advertising a similar concept. You can grab these spirits and put them into weapons. And Camelot Unchained did kind of do it first, but it is a little bit different.
Yeah, because in Camelot Unchained, it's the player's soul. But to be fair, we don't know what they're going to do to the weapons and the equipment.
Limitations to that.
Yeah.
We could just go by what they announced. So what they announced is spirits being bounded into weapons, which is why I said it.
Yeah.
Here's another one that, honestly, I don't know that I can identify any other MMOs that do this, at least that I've played. Any class can wear any armor.
ESO started to do that.
EQ had evolving weapons.
Yeah, but EQ had
you're right.
evolved.
TISO did kind of have where you could wear any kind of armor.
But they were just following the previous generations of single player Elder Scrolls games.
But
you
it
know,
is a
would you
fair
do
point.
that? Yeah.
TISO did
TISO
allow that.
TISO did do that. Didn't work out that great, but it worked.
Let's see.
Yeah.
The Simpsons did it first, though. Yeah. Muds let you do that. Okay, someone said Ultima Online let you do that. So
I think
add
in
that to our
Vanguard
list.
also you could, if I remember correctly.
yeah, because that was actually something Crowfall
And
didn't start with.
Conan, Age of Conan could do that too.
I didn't think you could in Age of Conan.
I think you could.
Because I played AOC a little bit, and I thought you were pretty restricted in what you could wear.
I'm
with
sure I don't remember exactly, but I haven't played it a lot. But if I remember correctly, you didn't have any restriction on the type of armor and weapons you were using.
There's not many games, but there are at least a few
No.
examples that I couldn't think of. But there are at least a few examples for all classes wearing all armor and being able to perform in some faction. Or fashion, I should say. I did want to point out that Crowfall actually didn't start with this concept. They started off with a much more restricted gearing concept, and then it was later on, after their Kickstarter, that they changed it to make it so that characters could wear any and all armor. So I do feel that's fair to mention.
Yep.
Equipment decay. Star Wars Galaxies had it. I don't really know of any other game MMOs that had it where you could make weapons and they would break. But Star Wars Galaxies
not
did have it.
permanently. Like most games
Yeah.
have equipment decay
Yeah.
temporarily.
That you can pay to
easily
repair. But
yeah.
To be fair, most games don't emphasize crafting very much either.
yeah.
No.
So both of these
So
games try
you
to
don't
emphasize
have
crafting
equipment
more.
breakage.
Oldvik
Yeah,
says they
DAOC
had.
had.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
that's kind
I
of one of
didn't
those
think about
things too, where when you're trying to break a mold and create a new trend, that kind of goes hand in hand with something else. So if you were going to do one, then the other one has to go with it, and so
Yeah.
naturally, you're kind of copying, but not
Neither
really.
game is going to have an auction house, which Shadowbane didn't have auction houses. TISO didn't really have auction houses. And Ultima Online didn't have auction houses. So it's been done. It's not common, but it has been done. Mainly it's
EverQuest
not
didn't have
common-
auction house.
Mainly, it's not common, I think, in PvE MMOs, largely. But the auction house itself is kind of a newer not newer concept, but the newer generation of MMOs mainly focused on the auction house. Let's see.
Well, the auction house is also very much a PvE system.
Yeah.
You don't
Now-
need an auction house for a PvP game.
One other thing, refining materials and alloys for crafting. I forgot to mention this earlier. Crowfall now has that in their crafting system where you can refine materials. Camelot Unchained also has it. The only MMO I know that does that is EVE Online. So
Yeah.
Fine.
It's
there may
pretty
be
much-
others. I don't know.
I
EVE Online is the only one I can think
No.
of.
I think
I'm
it's
sure
the
there
only
have
one.
been others. Seems like a fairly standard or common, maybe not common,
Maybe
but
Star
general
Wars-
practice.
Maybe Star Wars
do.
Galaxy, but that
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
You could
Most of the
kind
others don't have any emphasis on crafting, so their crafting systems are not very developed. So
Dare I say RuneScape?
Ashia says Firefall
Maybe.
used to let you refine, and Ragnarok Online did it. Actually, I think I do remember Ragnarok Online allowing that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I guess you could kind of say that WoW allowed you to do it, just because
No.
there were some recipes to refine some materials into like ingots. Technically, that is refining.
no,
but
that's
it's
not
lame.
refining.
But it's
That's
super
not
lame.
refining.
Let's see. NPC assistance for crafting. Star Wars: The Old Republic did this.
They tried.
Oh, they tried. Yes. They could They essentially just gathered for you. That's all
Yes.
they really did.
Yeah, pretty much.
Um,
And even then, it was for most of them, it was really shit.
yeah. And I don't know of any other MMOs that do this, but to be fair, I do want to point out Crowfall actually announced this publicly first. Camelot Unchained announced it later because they held on to their crafting docs and stuff for so long. So
But when was the
that-
crafting dock dated? How about that?
We
I'm just saying, I'm not
we're
digging into it. I'm not
starting
gonna,
the controversy, so
gonna-
let's go full there. He
Okay,
never
like
admitted
you
it.
want to go? You want to go full into it? Okay, it is entirely possible that they did have these documents on their internal forum, so it is entirely possible someone from Crowfall, someone leaked it to Crowfall, and they added it to their game before CU could announce it.
The
But we have
rumor,
no
and
evidence of that.
MG
so.
never confirmed it in those words, but he implied it. That the fact that they delayed the crafting reveal for so long is because they had their crafting reveal planned just after Crowfall, because Crowfall didn't plan the crafting reveal at that moment, so they had planned to do it. And when they saw Crowfall announcing it and announcing a crafting system so close to theirs, that MG was so disgusted that he shelved the crafting for a while to let things settle.
I will admit,
He never admitted it fully. But
there did seem to
it's-
be some implication that that there was a reason they delayed the crafting update for some of it, and that it might have been because of other updates that had happened for other games, and they were mad. But
I do feel
I don't know. That's speculation.
I've heard advertisements for other games that have promised that NPC kind of shopkeeping. I want to say I even heard that with Final Fantasy, Realm Reborn. But I've never seen it. I have that feeling that I've heard games want to do that, but have never actually
possible,
done that.
I'll say the game that I keep mentioning all the time that had it, Rhythm. And
You
it
do like to
has.
mention Rhythm.
I'm the only one who does. I know, but
I will also
had,
say, in a PvP focus game with crafting as heavy as it's going to be, it's kind of necessary.
Yeah.
Because it takes your time, and
Possibly.
like
And
Mark
that does-
Jacobs has
that
said,
does
he
kinda-
wants you to PvP. He
To
wants
some
you to be
degree,
involved.
For some of these, you have to go. There's a reason someone thought of this idea, whether it's adapting it from another MMO or because this particular type of game requires it in some fashion or really encourages that. So that is also something that has to be considered. Is that it's just people can independently come to the same conclusion. Let's see. Two other things. The last two I have: Banes and Boons. Shadowbane had boons. Outside of stats themselves being customizable, I don't know of other MMOs that had like a advantages and disadvantages system where you could apply them to your character, but Shadowbane did have at least the boons aspect of it. I think earlier someone might have mentioned one other game that did it in chat, but there's so much going on in chat right now that I don't really remember.
Yeah. You don't see that
again.
too
I
often.
think Vanguard had it. I think.
And obviously, it
Horizon...
goes to pen and paper first.
And even then, translating to RPG games, you see more of the advantage than you do the disadvantage.
Yes,
exactly. Because most games don't want their people to have disadvantages added on the characters.
Yeah.
Let's see. Francis. I know. Crowfall did have someone that worked on Star Wars Galaxies. It might have been Blair. I don't know their developers that well. Yeah. But I know one of them did.
Vic, for EQ, it was more racials than Banes and Boons, really.
Yeah, and someone just said ESO had race boons, but again, that's like racial bonuses.
That's more racials than Banes and Boons.
That's kind of standard, race bonuses, but we're talking about customizable bonuses and disadvantages that you can pick, and you have to have both in some way.
It seems there could be different implementations for both, but when I read the Crowfall's method of doing it, it sounded almost identical to Camelot Unchained with the point system, plus points, negative points, and trying to balance.
The point system definitely comes from pen and paper, I will say.
Yes,
absolutely.
It does.
So,
it completely
the
does.
last thing, physics for destruction and debris. We've said building destruction. There are a couple other MMOs that had it, but did any of them have physics for debris?
No.
Because that's usually a major performance no-no.
No, absolutely. No. Which is honestly, we didn't really start seeing that even in single-player games until closer to just maybe before Skyrim and a couple years before that.
And I'm asking here again because I'm not omniscient. I did research for all these things, but there's no great website that just lists all the game mechanics for every MMO.
No.
That would have been handy.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a technological advancement that is pretty new. So
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is pretty new, and Simpsons did it first. So
yeah.
Let's see here. So far, nobody's
Didn't
saying
Minecraft do it first?
that. Oh,
Well,
come on.
no.
And no, they
No.
didn't. You could float blocks in the middle of the air.
Yeah.
That's fine.
They,
in
they,
Minecraft.
no physics at
No
all.
physics in Minecraft.
Don't know. Never
Except for
played
arrows. Arrows had physics.
Sakaric seems to be saying he doesn't think that that's going to happen in Crowfall, even though it's advertised. He could be talking about something else in chat, though. I'm a little behind. All right. So if anybody thinks of anything, throw it out. I'm going to move on to my next question. I think, honestly, to be fair, most of these things absolutely can be explainable with other games. That other PvP MMOs have done these things before. You know, for the vast majority of these mechanics.
How many have done them all?
That
None.
is kind of the thing. Camelot Unchained was the first that pulled all of these into one MMO. I mean, I gave you the examples of different MMOs that had each of these mechanics, and for most, there was, you know, each one of those MMOs had maybe 2 or 3 of these mechanics, but certainly no single MMO had even half of these mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Camelot Unchained announced in 2013 and had all of these mechanics promised, well, not promised, but as their goal
Implied.
for a
Yeah.
single
Yeah.
PvP MMO. And then 2 years later, Crowfall is announced and has a very similar list of mechanics that they are trying to put into an MMO. And I don't want to say that necessarily means Crowfall is copying Camelot Unchained, but in a sort of way, you know, people have been saying for years that not Land Park, theme park MMOs have been copying WoW. They're another WoW clone. They've been doing
Yeah.
the same mechanics that WoW created first. And so,
No, that WoW copied
well,
first.
that WoW copied from other games, yeah.
Yes.
So in that way, a certain part of me does kind of feel like Crowfall, while I'm not going to say they're directly copying Camelot Unchained, because again, it's going to be a very different game,
Yeah.
they are kind of following in their footsteps in an MMO PvP genre. Like Camelot Unchained did it first. They started this focus on old school concepts with new technology in a PvP MMO, and now Crowfall, though they have their own twist on things, that's what people have been blaming theme park MMOs with WoW forever. They're just taking WoW concepts and putting a twist on them. And
Yeah.
it kind of feels like Crowfall is taking the same thing, a lot of the same things Camelot Unchained is doing, and they're putting their own twist on them.
Yeah, and you know we've actually kind of seen that over the last 2 or 3 years with other games trying to break the mold, trying to do more open world, sandbox type games, and none of them have really succeeded. Not because they're doing the wrong thing or even the right thing, but there's that trend, and Camelot Unchained seems to be getting a lot of hype. And so when a new developer comes in and they want to break that chain and follow the same trend, you know, they're going to just naturally kind of have some similarities.
Yeah.
That's true. They're both trying to do their own thing. But in doing their own thing, Crowfall is kind of doing a similar thing that Camelot Unchained started publicly doing. I should point that out.
Earlier.
Publicly doing.
That's
2 years earlier. And whether
Yeah.
they were already developing it or not, if you announce your thing 2 years after the other game does, well, they announced
in the
it 2
eyes
years
of
before
everyone.
Yeah. It's copying. Yeah.
And my ID here, basically just said, I guess what I'm trying to say is it does seem like CU is the leader in the new direction of MMOs, of at least PvP MMOs.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, that does imply maybe not copying in a negative way, not saying that they're stealing, that they're blatantly stealing ideas and concepts, but I mean, because every MMO has taken ideas from other games. Camelot Unchained 90% of these ideas are taken from some other game or multiple games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're pulling them into a new game. It just happens that Crowfall is now using 90% of the same concepts in a new game.
And
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure it's not like they look at this other game, you're like, oh, well, what are they doing? What are they doing? Let's do that. It's more like, let's look at the other side, say the right side, and it's like, what are they doing? We don't want to do that, so let's do this, which happens to be the same thing that the other
Yeah.
developers did the same process. We don't want to build this kind of game, so what do we do?
Yeah, and I do have
Yeah.
to say, honestly, like, to be fair, I'm not saying definitively that Crowfall devs are doing this, but to be fair, if I were making a PvP MMO, a lot of people have said that Crowfall and Camelot Unchained are not going to be competitors. I still view them as competitors because they're both PvP
I
MMOs
think
that are
they
going
will
to come
be.
out around the same time. They're going to compete for some of the same crowd, not all, but
Yeah.
some. And so if I was making Crowfall, I'd be looking at everything that Camelot Unchained announces and deciding whether or not I need to adapt it into my game or do some version of it because I want to be competitive. If they announce
Yeah.
a new thing, I'd be like, oh god, that's cool. How do we deal with this? Because otherwise we're going to lose people to them. I would be doing that. I'm not saying they are, but
Yeah.
I would be.
And the one thing you can't really fault CU of doing is copying others, because they announced everything we know about the game right now has been announced a while back.
Most of
So-
them, yeah.
Yeah, they're not radically changing any of their IDs.
No.
Most
And you know what?
the vast majority of it comes from the BSC days that were 2 years ago. So we know they had those IDs. They adapted them to make them feasible, because of the technical constraints. But they're still original IDs that they said they would do at least 2 years ago.
Yeah, and there are major differences in some areas
Yes.
Oh
that
yeah.
are in the same systems, but very key differences that make them completely different beasts
Mhm.
altogether. The main one that comes to mind is the temporary PvP world in
Yeah.
Crowfall. There's no persistent world versus Camelot Unchained, which is pushing everything to be, even though
Persistent.
nothing lasts forever,
Super
you know,
persistent.
is their mantra, but very, very persistent.
The world itself is persistent.
Yeah,
I
It
was
will
actually-
shape and change constantly, but it is persistent.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Ibsen and Francis Current just mentioned in chat that one of the most distinct things about Camelot Unchained is this map system. That they have this permanent islands that are going to move around based on how you invade them, you take them over, you can pull them over, you can then build on them, and the environment changes based on the season and who controls it and all this stuff. That's never been done. It's totally like unique to Camelot Unchained. And it's kind of funny because I think, as you said, one of the major thing that defines these two games as two separate types of things, one of the major systems, is both their mapping system. For
Yeah.
Camelot Unchained, it's the permanent islands that change. For Crowfall, it's procedurally generated temporary game worlds. They're both very different, make a totally different
And-
game experience, even
Yeah.
if they're based on a lot of the same mechanics.
and they both cause different effects on the other systems. Like crafting for Crowfall is much more quicker. Get
Yeah.
everything out. You have maybe a 3-month span of this temporary world lasting.
Mhm.
It's a much quicker thing versus crafting in Camelot Unchained is just going to be
Which
more of
is
a
gonna be
steady, continual thing.
Yeah. And,
And as Odulvik said, CU will be more of a long-term investment, where you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
expect to have returns right away on your efforts. Everything will take a good amount of time. You won't have your character at max, at least at the soft cap, in a month. It's going to take months. While Crowfall is more of a short-term thing, which is closer to the current MMO's spirit, which is things come quickly, and the changes in their campaigns and their different realms will change a lot. And I think for them, the way they thought is that they want to renew things, make things new again for players that have a short attention span from all the MMOs we've experienced in the last decade. While CU is going to more of the root of the MMOs, where it would take you years to have your character at max level, well equipped and everything. So it was more of a time investment.
Yeah. Let's see. There was something I was going to say. I was getting behind in chat here. A lot of people were fussing, saying that Crowfall has performance issues, and that it could last a very long time if it fixes some of those. But that's another difference. Camelot Unchained, that's the reason they built their own engine, because they were really worried about those performance issues. Francis Current said that Crowfall is not procedurally generated like CU is. It's pre-made parcels of terrain created by artists and stitched randomly together. I do want to say that's exactly what Camelot Unchained is, and largely they're not stitched together randomly, but they're not procedurally generated. They create all the terrain, and then they procedurally generate some of the terrain
the
effects
things
different
in it,
like
of it.
where the trees are, things like that. The actual
but
terrain itself.
Some of that, a large portion of it is intentionally placed. It's not all procedurally generated. They use the procedurally generated stuff to kind of speed it up. But there is some manually placed stuff in there. So there's a little similarity in there, but different methods again. Because as you said, they've got. I would still call that procedurally generated. I mean, it's not completely, but if they're making pre-made assets and then the game world is randomly putting them together, to me that's procedurally generated.
And I know this is mostly talk about their similarities, but the second largest thing that makes them unsimilar to me is their emphasis on the player or players themselves, where Crowfall seems very more oriented about individual players and being able to let the players feel powerful through being skillful. And because all their weapons and stuff disappear after each reset and things like that, versus Camelot Unchained, which is not so much about any of that as it is about working together with other players.
On that similar sort of note, the target audiences, I think, are very different for the most part. Camelot Unchained, it seems to be going back to the roots of MMOs. They're really looking for the hardcore old school type MMO players by and large, and they're hoping to get in some of the newer players too, but that's the audience they're really aiming at. Whereas Crowfall, in my mind, seems to be trying to target a lot more of the newer MMO players and to some extent the MOBA players and newer game genre players, and pull them into an MMO PvP world. Again, they both overlap some as well. They're definitely not completely distinct, which is why I think they do compete some. But I think they are primarily targeting slightly different audiences. Let's see.
And Sacrax, I didn't say it will take years to reach the soft cap in CU. But it will take a lot longer than in pretty much all MMOs we've seen in the last 10 years. So it's still a time investment. It will not come fast, and it's probably going to take at least months to reach the soft cap.
And honestly, I think that's a good approach to get the type of audience they're aiming for, because you look at like EVE Online, that time investment makes people not want to quit playing. The people who've been playing that game for years, they don't want to drop out. They've got too much invested in that game. Oldovic, to clarify on what I was saying, Camelot Unchained does have a lot of procedurally generated environment. However, the game world itself, the map, is not procedurally generated. The mountains, I don't think, are procedurally generated. They decide where mountains go and where the cities go and where everything goes, where the islands start off, where certain types of environment elements go. Like they may go, a forest goes here. They don't put the trees there. That is procedurally generated. But they go, a mountain goes here. It's this size.
Yeah.
You know, they shape the terrain themselves, because if it was procedurally generated completely, then we'd end up with mountain passes we couldn't go through, and you know, it would just be
or mountain appearing where you have built your keep when the biome changed because another realm took control of it.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, the shapes of the islands themselves will be fairly consistent, whereas the terrain on the island is what changes.
Exactly, and that's what they've shown. Like, they can grab terrain and go, okay, I want a mountain here, shape it, and then the game procedurally manipulates the grass and everything
the biome itself rather than the terrain
to make it adapt, and that's the part that's procedurally generated. Honestly, I guess to wrap up, it seems to me that it's most fair to say that Crowfall is not doing anything that other MMOs have not done in borrowing and being inspired by other games. And most of the concepts that they have used, that Camelot Unchained also uses, have been used in other MMOs. So they're not completely original to Camelot Unchained. However, Camelot Unchained has kind of broached a new direction of PvP MMOs, and Crowfall does seem to be adapting a whole lot of the same concepts that Camelot Unchained pulled together into a single MMO. So in my mind, that suggests that Camelot Unchained basically has started a new path of MMOs that Crowfall is continuing on in their own way.
I agree. Fair assumption.
Yeah, because it's more
with other games later on. But
yeah. So it's less, for me. It's less copying purely the system and just throwing it in your game. It's more getting inspired by the ID and adapting it to your own vision in game. So yes, they might be copying IDs of it, but it's still not a full copy like we've seen in some of the other games, where suddenly you have a system that has no reason to be here, aside from the fact that it was in a game that was successful and the developers thought it would be successful in that game too.
And it certainly is fair to point out that Camelot Unchained, while it was successful funding, and people could say, well, they were successful funding, so Crowfall went, well, people like that, so we're going to do it too. That's possible. I can't say that they did. Mm-hmm. It's not a game that was out. It's not like WoW, which came out and was hugely successful, and then a lot of other games went, we're going to do the same thing they did. And
we're going to get the 10 million subscribers also.
Yeah, both games are still very much a concept at this point.
Yeah.
Until they're actually released and people are paying the monthly
subscription
fee.
Either one could still crash and burn.
Yeah. And even then, you're still looking 3 months down the line at least. For some players, a lot of players are maybe 1 month down the line as far as giving it time for them to decide if that's what they want or not.
Yeah.
So we're not going to know if they were successful until we know. Hi, Kelly.
Well, I think we've yeah, my dog's throwing a fit now. All right, I think we've pretty much covered the topic. So I am going to stop the recording. I want to thank everybody for hanging out and watching
and from chatting, because the chat was really active today.
Yes, chat was super active. Thank you.
I have one more point to make, and that is that Camelot Unchained has air. End of discussion.
Yeah.
True that.
I agree with that.
Physics system immediately
I'm
better.
Sorry. I'll take your air and I'll raise it with the crafter class.
That too. So I'll go ahead and stop recording, and well, thank everybody for coming out. Thank everybody for chat, and we will see everybody in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.